Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Snakes and Ladders. Charlie's finally back from his long holiday and ready to get back to work. So here we are. Lads, how are we?
Wow, he actually went for the preemptive jibe. I'm quite impressed with that, Jimmy.
Yeah, how was your holiday?
Months long. That's standard for you, I know, but our audience wouldn't know.
Literally nobody in my life could believe that you were on holiday again yesterday and today. No one. They actually refused to believe it.
I'm not
That
on
is
holiday.
not physically possible.
I am not on holiday.
Is that a hotel room behind you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's not right. Yeah. My wife and children are on holiday.
Listen, Jimmy, I think the moral of the story is if you've got hair like Ben's, you get a lot of holiday time. It's fine.
We should all be so lucky.
Situation. Anyway, we have been gone for a little while, and I'm coming to my man Jim Lee to tell us everything that's been happening in the markets over the past few months in a minute and a half.
Minute and a half. Yeah, I mean, it's largely all based on one man who lives on Pennsylvania Avenue and whatever he wants to do in the world, basically. No, I mean, it's obviously, we don't really do the politics on here, but obviously it's been pretty challenging macro conditions. However, I would say the thing which is most surprising is how well the global stock market has held up. The S&P hit new highs this week. The FTSE 100's basically back to where it was pre the sort of Iran excursion. So, I mean, it's incredible just how resilient these markets have been.
What a PR way of saying war. The PR excursion. There's a man who's written a few, spun a few yarns in his career.
Yeah, their ships just went slightly further into the Middle East than everyone else expected. Yeah.
Well, talking about PR, I know one of the things we wanted to talk about this week was succession planning. And, you know, from my point of view, when a new CEO comes into the role, for me as a marketing guy, it is just a marketing, you know, obviously the CEO is running the business, but really when you're talking about succession planning, that is all built for me initially around how this is going to be communicated to the investors and the wider market and how important that is. Now, I think many people would have very differing views on how important a CEO is and the succession, but I know we wanted to go into it a little bit. And Charlie, you had a couple of interesting stats that certainly surprised me about succession planning and how that affects markets.
Yeah, I mean, this is a thread that started in Courtcast in our day jobs. We've partnered with an amazing guy called David Mitchell, who currently looks after Zach Brown, as the CEO of McLaren Formula One, for those that aren't Formula One fans, as a personal brand. And one of the things he, you know, just spells out really clearly is there's an interesting brand exercise here where you have a personal CEO brand, who am I as a human, sat alongside the business's brand and what it's trying to achieve. And Ben, to your point, some people have different views, therefore, on how important CEO is, because is the business more important? And in theory, it should be. And his whole point is you need to see yourself as a custodian of this thing that should live long beyond you. And so what does that mean about the way you behave? And some people, you almost can't extract the human from the brand. And I think some of those stats are tied up in that, which is around companies this is in the S&P, but smaller companies that have grown through that have remained founder-led, i.e. the personality of that person is really quite tightly tied up in the business, have on average outperformed the market by 3 times. Now, you could allocate some of that to the fact that lots of those will be smaller businesses that have just caught fire, right? And they're accelerating. So then you're comparing them to Walmart or the big stalwarts of the sector, which might skew things a little bit. But nevertheless, it shows you, I suppose, the power of personality. And then more importantly, we're seeing a trend where either through activist investment in the bigger firms or just general pressures of the market, that this January, I believe, and I need to fact check this, but I don't, because I think the trend stands. But January 2025 recorded one of the highest volumes of CEO exits on record ever in a single month. So a huge transition period. And of course, any sensible viewer is going to be shouting AI and, you know, what does that mean and why that companies are under pressure to do things differently and maybe bring in a leadership that have a different experience as a result. But fact is, as an investor, speaking personally, I feel like it's really obvious that a part of why I choose to invest in a company is the person running it. that to be impressed by maybe not just the person, actually, I'd stretch this to the C-suite, to the people involved and how they handle the company, how I view them to be good or bad custodians of that business, will impact what I'm willing to pay beyond the underlying theoretical value of that business, cash, assets, goodwill, etc. I would still suggest that the single thing you're looking for is good management who can make the most of it. And one of the things you see, or I think we see far too often, is that an announcement that just hits the RNS feed with a few lines going, yeah, so-and-so has been replaced, and we thank them for their service. And that, it's so choke held by that lovely sense of PR that Jimmy just gave us about an excursion in Iran. It's so choke held by not saying the wrong thing that you actually don't get a chance to say the right thing. And before I hand over, I'll give one kind of interesting example. There are a couple of others we could touch on. Oh, hello, he's off.
Sorry, guys. No, thank you. No, thank you. No.
Oh, that's just the maid coming to clean the room while you're on holiday.
Just to be very clear, that stays in.
That is. Fabian,
my wife and children are on holiday.
Yeah.
I'm
This is a trip that your wife literally cited as being a trip for Ben.
Can I just have a quick side note, by the way? This was supposed to be for my birthday, and it is without doubt the absolute last place I'd ever want to go for my birthday. This place. Honestly, we were talking yesterday, dude. Sorry, I know I'm totally cutting into this. This is a kids' holiday place where parents are just here for their children. I thought I was coming to a sort of a nice place, and after I'd worked, I could go somewhere and the kids would run around. Everything here is set up for kids. Like there's ginormous teddy bears roaming around the whole hotel, and basically we're just security guards for kids. That's what I'd be brought to. I'd be brought to a place for my children.
Chloe, I hope you watch our podcast. You get to see this, because I need the world to know that even I was like, this is a world-class move. Chloe has been selling this to Ben as a little birthday treat for weeks. He turns up there and he finds out, oh yeah, by the way, 2 of my really good friends from the island just happen to be here with their kids. Chloe, I hope you watch this podcast, so the next time you see me, you can give me a hug and be like, well played. You've stitched him up spectacularly. And not only is he not enjoying his holiday and is it not for his birthday, but she's opened the door to us to rib him for being on holiday again. It's just incredible.
But I've never been to a place where you spend all this money so your kids have fun but you still have to guard
all the responsibility with none of the benefits, really. Yeah, okay.
It's worse than being at home, because at least home I can contain my walls. Here, I stop working, I go out, and I have to chase them around the ginormous hotel. Lenny, we had dinner last night. Lenny disappeared. So Lenny had gone in a heartbeat. Where was she? Naked outside in the pool. And literally, there were people, like other parents there, being like, "Is this your child? She's just jumped into the pool and she almost drowned." And I was like, it's anyway.
Benjamin College, Jesus Christ.
It's a fucking nightmare. Anyway, let's continue. So I'm delighted I can give you a bit of joy.
Just confirming that Ben's on holiday side. So what we're talking about, succession planning, clarity of message. Talk about spinning a clear message. This is a work of art, right? We're just watching the demonstration of it. How powerful it can be. And ultimately, that's what this comes down to. So we compare, Unilever has done a classic 4-paragraph RNS, stepping down CEO's mutual agreement type thing that's come out recently. I know this is a few years ago now, but amazing. When Rolls-Royce's new CEO came in, am I going to be brave enough to try and pronounce his name? I feel really bad. Ergin Bilgic.
No, you did worse than that. You did in the before the podcast.
In our preamble, yeah. Anyway, but bold statements, these are the things that companies are terrified of and that people buy into. He comes in within days of stepping into the new role. He publicly described Rolls-Royce as a burning platform facing its last chance. Okay, but importantly, he gave a clear strategy. He said, I believe there are 4 pillars. I believe I think he said 17 target, doesn't matter. He came out with like a statement of intent and then he repeated it. If you think about this from a comms perspective, he gave you a person with vision. He didn't try and pretend there weren't issues, which I think is one of the big problems in big business and managing the PR flow generally, is that no one wants to admit to any of the challenges, which is stupid. People aren't stupid. They can see them, just go, yeah, we know this is a problem. How are we going to do it? And as an individual has led that company. When he took over, shares are at 100p. They're now at 725 in a couple of years of implementing that plan. Now, it cannot all be put down to the fact that he came out with this clear vision of strategy, but it's a big part of it. And my piece to you boys, basically to discuss, is that I think all of these deserve the human narrative video content to come with it that would enable unlock huge gains in investors. So I'm curious to get your take.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's also important to try. There are different reasons for CEOs to change. So some is because it is all about there's a sort of mandate for change. So you look at the Labour government when they first started, they decided to
You're
kitchen
using them
sink
as an
it.
example. This is brave.
I'm using them as the theoretical idea of what you do to kitchen sink something. So you say 22 billion black hole, everything's gone to shit, and we're going to reset. But what you're essentially doing is in people's minds, you're setting the bar as low as humanly possible in the attempt to then under promise and over deliver. So if you're a CEO who comes in, the Rolls-Royce one is a good one. He's basically come in and said, at the burning platform, we've got to tear the rule book up and go on. So he has been brought in on a change mandate, whereas some CEOs, either there's a retirement or it's someone from the business just takes over, and it's very much so a business as usual. Nothing's going to change too much. The vision, the strategy, the fundamentals, it's here. But I would argue that both have an equal importance in terms of being well communicated to people, because if you're going to change something, you need to explain to them, why are we changing it? What's the change going to look like? How long is it going to take? What's the value here? But similarly, if you're just going to be business as usual, you need to explain to them why you're not changing and why you think the business as usual path is the way to keep things going. And both of those really lend themselves to in-person type interviews or pre-recorded video or something along those lines, not least of all because logistically, if you think of Rolls-Royce, Rolls-Royce is a global business. So the new CEO can't be in 1,000 places at once. So rather than there being an email that goes out going, by the way, there's a new CEO, here's 3 lines on him, and here's his CV, and this is why you should be interested. Something like a pre-recorded 3-minute video, which can be sent to everyone the morning it is. He can sit there, explain who he is, what his background, his vision, and you could then do a live Q&A format so the employees and the stakeholders get some buy-in. It's 100% the way the sort of future of CEO and leadership changes generally is going to go, because it's the authenticity and the ability for people to kind of feel like they're touching what they're saying.
I just want to pick up on something there. The pre-recorded thing has a real risk of feeling so sanitized that it's not much better than the 4 lines. I think there's something about, not only do I want to see the person, but I think you need to try and give them a framing, a context. And Ben, this is probably where I look to you as to what the heck that actually looks like, but something that gives them a chance to feel a bit more authentic and not just the classic, locked off frame bit, at which point you go, probably reading a teleprompter, it's been vetted, and it's okay that that's true anyway. The narrative, of course, is controlled. We understand that, but you want just a little glimmer of the person. I don't know. I think that's the additional challenge there.
Yeah, that challenge is being felt not just in personality, in succession planning, but everywhere. And that is something that's evolving all the time, right? And it's evolving in everybody's day-to-day. The classic one is sports and media training. If you watch any interview with any sports person after anything, that has become completely sanitized. And I think, although that's not in the corporate, although the corporate world might appear like it's not, sort of constant media content and updates like sports, the same people who interact with the corporate world have probably interacted with sports content and things like that. And, I think people are absolutely bored to hell of the way that personalities come across in a media trained environment these days. I think people can see straight through it. And I don't blame corporates for going, if you were to sort of go video content, I think it goes without saying, I completely agree with what you're saying, that all this stuff can be done with video. If it's business as usual, well, it's not, because it's already been released that it's changing. Stakeholders and and investors are going to see that something's changed. So you can't just hide away from it. If it's like you say, Jimmy, if it's business as normal, everyone sees there's a change. You've got to tell them it's business as normal. If it's not business as normal, then that is the real marketing effort of, how do we use this force of personality to show investors that this is a new beginning, that things are going to change. But when you're talking about authenticity, that's the real skill and the nuance to be able to take these videos. I think people are understanding the language of communication, how video works, and they can see straight through something that has been written by your press officer that is literally just behind the side of frame here, which is why we keep on talking about Daniel Ek and all those CEOs that do their quarterly reports on Instagram in portrait. Now that might seem very avant-garde for some of the successions that you've talked about, right? But there is a certain thing, people that got huge coverage, and people use that as a sort of benchmark for what they were doing because he was on a beach or he had some sort of, aquatic vista behind him. I don't know exactly where he was, but he was a portrait on his phone there, and that felt so authentic. That felt from the heart. He might have had his,
but it doesn't matter, does it? It's the point.
You would never have known. You would never have known. And actually,
I think that's what TikTok's done to the world. It's ripped that back. It's like, no, TikTok has given us the sort of raw version of everybody, and we've gone, no, that's what we expect now, if we're honest.
Yeah, that's what we expect.
Speaking person doesn't even have it, but the type of video it's produced everywhere has changed that. You just don't get away with the hype.
I think when you have to deliver bad news or maybe stuff that might be marginal as far as people are going to receive it, I think societal sort of changes has been more responsive to people having that frank, open conversation with the world through that sort of that lens. They're more empathetic to that. I think if the more staged it is, and you have got something here, I think the more people see through it, and the less empathetic people are.
And I think there's also a thing of people view it through the prism of, well, leadership transitions only happen once in a blue moon, which just isn't true. So if you take the FTSE 350 as an example, there are roughly 30 to 35 leadership changes a year that take place, which means that at any one point in time, there's 1 in 10 companies that are going through a leadership change. So this is not something that happens every now and again in a blue moon. This is day in, day out. There's changes, and they need to be well articulated. And there's nothing worse for an investment case than for all of a sudden an RNS to come out of the blue saying so and so's off, because some of these CEOs are incredibly tied to the businesses, the investment case, and everything else. And so there being a well-managed transition is vital in order to sort of minimize share price volatility once the announcement has been made.
Sorry, something I'm unsure of, and I don't want to go into this too much, but how much should a CEO be tied to the share price?
Beautiful. So that was my last question to pose to you, is exactly that. We've spoken about it, and I said David Mitchell made this point when we were agreeing on our sort of partnership with him of personal brand, company brand, the thing, especially if it's a business as usual succession planning type of thing. How much work and how early goes into this? I mean, Warren Buffett would be the absolute keystone example. How do you get a business untied? So how, in your opinion, I'd love both of your takes on this, how much is it a good thing, or how can it be managed if it's a risk to the company that we do have the CEO personality? I know my take, but I'm curious to get yours first. How intrinsic do they become, and how much do you let one supersede the other? And
Can I come in on this? I think it's incredibly important. I think the personality of the CEO is becoming more and more important. I think my question is, in the actual day-to-day running of it, how important is it? I always told that CEO recruits and goes for lunches. And so, and it can obviously have the board vision. But, I have the
why
same
we made
thing.
you CEO, Ben?
Recruitment is definitely my Achilles heel.
I was going to say he's 50% of that. He's not the one.
I'm great at lunches. But sorry, where was I going with that? CEO. But just to bring it back to your sort of political adjacency, Jimmy, I think the same thing about prime ministers. I think most things are sort of done by the cabinet and by the advisors around them. I think
yes,
the fact. Yeah, when everyone says, "Oh,
I think Keir Starmer's definitely trying to make that case right now with everything going on. I don't do anything.
Jimmy really doesn't he, for the Labour government? Crikey. But I mean, I always find it so ridiculous when anybody says, "Oh, this prime minister has done this." And I would say the same for CEOs. I don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Jimmy. How often, in your opinion, how often does CEOs come into the boardroom, dictate the mandate, from that singular point of power, and make sure it is executed?
I think it's really the thing I would say, just reverting back to the original question, it is really important that a CEO plays the role of kind of delivering on the business strategy and is seen as important to the investment case. I would, however, say there's definitely a danger with the CEO being seen as integral to, or if they were not there, it having a fundamental damaging effect to
100%.
the investment case. And so then how you decouple that, it's why some of these huge companies that are founder led, I mean, can you imagine what would happen if today a press release came out that said Mark Zuckerberg's leaving Meta? I mean, it would, or Elon's leaving Tesla. I mean, it would be horrific. But I think that comes back to your founder led comment of they're so kind of ingrained and everything else. But to answer your question a little bit, Ben, I think fundamentally all these companies are owned by the shareholders. The board are answerable to the shareholders, and so when you do go through this CEO selection process, the board have a pretty good idea in mind of what their shareholders really want to see. So the Unilever example is one. I mean, Nelson Peltz at Trian came onto that board as an activist. He has a big slug of shares in that company. Therefore, it is logical to believe that he has a large say in who that CEO is, what their mandate is, how much control business sort of focuses. And I think most companies now, it's not just a one-man band. That's what the board is there for. It's the corporate governance, it's the oversight, it's everything.
Okay, so interesting. So I think it's different depending on the circumstances you brought up, Jimmy. For the business as usual and the founder led, I believe you can achieve the succession even though you've had a really big personality. There's going to be a couple of things that are contingent on that. One of the things I said really early is I don't think this should end at the CEO. The C-suite should need to feature more. I think we're all guilty probably of promoting that the single figurehead does the video and the touch point. Actually, as investors, if you feel, oh, there's a bit of a unit here, you can then start to buy into the fact that parts of that unit can change without breaking it. And also that if you're doing the succession bit, you need time. Everyone needs time to get used to something. So you want to start to see an inevitable changeover happening well before it gets announced. So to your point on Zuckerberg, could he leave and it'd be fine? Yeah, I could buy that it would be fine without him. But he's just going to need to spend probably a year co-promoting some other member, doing videos, and it sort of eases from one human to the next. But it's why the human story is really important. And I guess it does put an impetus on any incoming CEO of a senior level, taking over BP or Unilever or these sorts of things, to be a personality. It's an additional part of their job that maybe they didn't have. Back to the point, Ben, you were making, how much are they having the mandate and the change? Well, hopefully they're able to do it. I would argue that most things are better when a point of authority can make decisions and take action, and it's not whittled down by too much committee on the way, right? Great ideas get bashed around too much. However, I accept your point that actually, especially of a company of a Unilever size, it's just it'd be impossible. You wouldn't have oversight over all those teams, right? You wouldn't. So, of course, the answer is a little bit in between. But I think it's incumbent upon any board now who wants the next generation of investors to keep investing in their business to understand that we are going to be assessing them on their personality as well, and that there's an opportunity and a risk. We've got used to the Elon Musk type of thing in the world and the Mark Zuckerberg and knowing these names and knowing them as massive features. So we're also now expecting that of the next set. And so you're going to have to work out how to provide that if you want the next generation to continue being interested and giving a shit. Because if all you can give them is reports that may be good, the business may be performing well, without some personality to translate it, I think you're going to lose a whole bunch of investors. Basically, it's that simple.
Very true.
We're going to go on the more of the TikTok video. We're going to want to see it and show it and play it a bit.
Yeah, just to sort of find, you've seen that. You've seen, how companies that use that force of personality like Tesla have outperformed companies that are doing way better than Tesla, right?
So much better, yeah.
You know, those companies that is business as usual, they've lost out. They've lost new money, retail, institutional new money to those companies simply because of that. Anyway, I'm now looking forward to see who's going to be succeeding me as the host of this podcast. I think the board isn't considering either of you two, but let's see how you get on.
Well, if you want to call that maiden to take over, Ben, feel free.
Well, lads, it's been emotional. It's been a long time. It's good to be back in the same digital room as you two, looking so fine. Charlie looking so refreshed after his 5-month holiday. And thank you to you guys for your ongoing support. We love you very much. And we'll see you for the next episode, which won't be as long, we promise.
See you later.
Bye.
Ta-ta.